they had quite they got a turnover there at the election, right? Was Tom elected official before he became the
I don't want to know you.
I was working with yeah. So the guy I was working with, Jim Rogers.
Yeah.
So that was off now, and he was very pro Chevron. Chevron had that accident right before the election, right?
Yeah, they did. They had that.
A fire or something. That's why I haven't heard from Jim Rogers in a while. He's kind of a character. Have you ever met him? Have you ever like looked at his background? They one of these lawyers that advertises heavily.
Yes, sir.
Welcome to the January 21st meeting of the Board for the Contra Costa Transportation Authority. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Commissioner Hudson. Here. Commissioner Metcalf. Commissioner Mitchoff. Here. Commissioner Glover is absent. Commissioner Butt.
Here.
Commissioner Abelson.
Here.
Commissioner Pierce.
Here.
Commissioner Durant.
Here.
Commissioner Arnerich is absent. Commissioner Taylor. Here. Chair Romick.
Here.
So we definitely have a quorum. We also have present Representative Gail Murray. Thank you.
On to item number D, public comment. I do not have any speaker cards for public comment at this time. So we'll move on to approval of the minutes.
Move approval.
Second.
First by Evelson, second by Pierce. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries unanimously. On to consent calendar. Is there anything we want to remove before moving on?
It's tempting, but
No.
Is that a motion?
no.
Move the consent calendar.
I'll second.
First by Tom and second by David. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries unanimously. On to item 3, major discussion items. There are none. On to item number 4, regular agenda items. 4.1, new item, various projects, authorization to execute 418, agreement 418 with the California Highway Patrol for construction zone enhanced enforcement program services.
Good evening, Chair Romick, Commissioners. My name is Ivan Ramirez, CCTA staff, and this is an action item where staff is seeking authorization for the Executive Director to enter an agreement with the California Highway Patrol for construction zone enhancement enforcement program, otherwise known as COZIP. This is a service that the California Highway Patrol provides to local agencies and Caltrans, whereby the local agencies can hire CHP officers to be patrolling the construction zones so that it enhances safety. Just their presence at the site slows down traffic. So when the authority approves an award for a contract, and in it there is the construction allotment, supplemental funds and contingency, there's a line item there for COZIP. So that has allowed us to get into agreements with CHP for each individual contract. Now, late last year, as we were getting ready to extend these contracts, CHP informed us that they want to change their process, and they want to have a single entity contract with us that covers all the construction contracts. So, in consultation with the chair and APC chair, the executive director signed the contract, and now we're bringing it to the full board for authorization to execute the contract. One item about this contract is that it's going to expire at the end of June. Normally, they go calendar year. This particular one is just going to carry us through the end of June, and we're going to come back to you for another agreement prior to the expiration of this one. So with that, I'm prepared to answer any questions.
Questions to staff at this time? No.
Apologize for being a couple of minutes late. No, I'm going to hold a question. It's a question for Randy. And I'll talk to you afterwards. Sorry.
Mike?
Yeah, as I read this item, I asked, why would you not want to go ahead and do this? And I couldn't come up with any reason why you wouldn't. And then I asked, why is this thing even as a discussion item? Why wasn't it just on consent? It's sort of, isn't this a no-brainer, or am I missing something here?
Julie?
Actually, because it was not on the admin committee agenda and it was a new item, I asked Randy to go ahead and make sure that it was vetted, and I know that he talked with Kevin as well, but we just wanted it to be as transparent as possible. We could have put it on consent. We thought about it, and I asked that it be put here so everyone was clearly aware that we had already signed this contract because we have to keep working. Don't want to delay anything. But that going forward, these will be separate from the standard construction projects. So there'll be a separate contract with the CHP.
So the answer to the question is overabundance of caution.
You bet.
You bet.
Transparency
Fair
wins.
enough.
And the process changed this year. That the whole thing, it came up, rather than being a project-by-project type thing we signed with them, they wanted a yearly agreement or a bi-year, or a half-yearly agreement. So that's why we had to go through the process of consulting with Julie and myself before, and didn't take it to here any sooner. That's why I didn't make any other committees. It's Caltrans changed the process.
Well, I'd like to move the item.
Second. Go do something about that COZEEP. There's got to be a better name.
Had a first by Mike, second by Dave. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Nay? Motion carries unanimously.
COZEEP.
4B, approve Resolution 1504-G authorizing the authority to apply for and receive Metropolitan Transportation Commission discretionary funds through its climate initiative programs for the Car Share for All Car Share project.
Good
Peter.
evening, Chair Romick and Commissioners. Randy quickly mentioned that we received this grant in his Executive Director's report last month. So the requirement for MTC to have this resolution of local support gave us an opportunity to give you a little bit more information about it. Again, the resolution is required by MTC because the CMAQ funds that are part of this grant program are considered discretionary funds to the Commission, and as such, they want to get a local resolution of support from the applicants to the program. So the Car Share for All project is a partnership between CCTA, Bay Area Climate Collaborative, and City Car Share. City Car Share is really the implementing agency. They're the ones that are going to be doing all the hard lifting on this. And the authority is the fiscal agent and will oversee that part of the grant application. There is an attachment in your agenda that is on page 4.2-10 that gives you the program overview. It's primarily car share vehicles through City Car Share. They're going to be using electric and plug-in electric and hybrid vehicles. They also will be using at least one wheelchair accessible vehicle, or that, as well as a new technology, which is a solar powered off the grid charging station that they'll be able to deploy as part of this. We have here tonight with us Mike Harrigan, who's with the Bay Area Climate Collaborative, and formerly with City Car Share, so he would be able to answer any questions you might have specifically about City Car Share, as well as the project itself, if you have any questions. I did want to mention, from the perspective of this grant application, we're looking at primarily two cities, both in West Contra Costa County, El Cerrito and Richmond. That fits both into the grant as being urban, suburban areas, as well as minority and low-income communities. It also works as far as City Car Share's business model of growing outwardly from an urbanized area, which helps the car share program work better because they're gaining membership in a way where they can work together better. So with that, I'll ask your support for the resolution. If you have any questions, Mike and I could try and answer those.
When I publicized this, I think when we talked about it last time, I got some feedback from people who were asking why the BART station, or can we look at somewhere else? I'm not necessarily advocating that, but is this idea that it's going to be deployed at or near the Richmond BART station, is that, how flexible is that?
I think there was one of the aspects of the grant is that it's deployed near public transportation facilities, but I will let Mike discuss that a little bit more. Maybe he can give you some input.
Well,
back
here
and
was
forth
the
as far as
feedback,
locations.
as I understand it. People were saying, if it's at or near the BART station, then basically it's going to be for people commuting into Richmond to get a car to go do some business and take it back to the BART station. And they said those people typically aren't people with the greatest needs. And I don't know I didn't hear a lot of suggestions about what the alternatives were, but I just wondered if this is something that's open for discussion or if it's basically set in concrete.
It's not set in concrete, completely open for discussion.
How and when are we going to have a chance to do that?
So I can't speak for City Car Share, but they will ultimately make the final selection of the sites where these go. I think their first idea was to be, at the BART station or close to the BART station. But personally, I've been to Richmond and looked at the downtown area there. There's lots of, I think, potential locations that could be considered there. I think probably the best thing is once we get underway with this grant, we will meet with you, your staff, whoever you nominate to discuss where the precise locations are.
That's fine, thanks.
Yeah, as a transit rider and in particular as a bus rider, I ride with those poor people every day, multiple times a day. And I would suggest to you that, in fact, those people will congregate. They're all kind of like all over the place, but they will take a bus to get there. And that's the answer to the puzzle, because that's the place where there are the most buses. It actually might have nothing at all to do with BART, sorry.
So it's actually a transit center, right?
It's a transit center, and that means buses too. Yeah. And there's a huge number of buses there, as in Del Norte. Del Norte has even more. What? In El Cerrito, we call it Del Norte. And it's ours. It's our city. But anyway, so and the same is true in El Cerrito, that there are enormous numbers of buses, and people would, if they wanted to the use of a car, would probably end up taking a bus to get there. And then I have an unrelated question, which is the wheelchair aspect. Is that for the passenger or is that for the driver?
It's for the passenger. So it's a van. It's a wheelchair accessible van. Have to have a driver to actually drive it. It's not a one that's equipped with controls or anything.
Thank you. That's good.
I'd like to comment back on your first comment. That is that the experience with car sharing is that it's best to locate the cars close to transit centers and main routes of public transportation to be, so that it becomes kind of part of the multimodal transportation system. City car share has been around for about a little over 10 years, maybe close to 12 years now. Had great experience with determining where the best locations are. They'll do some surveys and, again, work with staff there. So I think we can find some locations that are good for all of us.
Thank you for being here. Question I have, maybe back to staff first, is there's a qualification in there which starts to lead me to believe that it's not as defined as it might say, and it says that El Cerrito and Richmond are eligible for, I'll read it exactly, the car pods, which means that's not decided. So who decides? This is about $1 million coming through MTC. Whose money really going to? It doesn't look like it's coming to us. It looks like we're administering and it's going directly to these entities. Who approves that plan before the money is distributed or spent? And does it come back to the committee here to say, yeah, that's the $1 million and that's where I want to spend it? It kind of seems, and I'll be honest, so you know why I'm asking the question. It seems as though that isn't the process. So I hope maybe you can clarify that.
The grant that was submitted specified primarily West County. It also specified potentially Bishop Ranch as a possible, because industrial or business parks were eligible. Unfortunately, the grant wasn't funded at full amount, and some decisions are having to be made, and they aren't completely made yet. But through work that City Car Share did and looking at their business plan and what they felt would be sites that would use the service the most, where current membership mixing with new membership would help generate. And part of it is this is climate initiative funds, so the projects need to show some vehicle emission reductions, and so that requires a certain amount of use of those vehicles, and they felt like the most use would be in that, as that circle moved out, El Cerrito and the Richmond area. There's also potential areas in Alameda County south of Oakland, and they're looking at West Oakland as well. But we know for sure within Contra Costa we're looking at the El Cerrito, Richmond area to locate those pods. So, like I said, City Car Share is doing the bulk of the work. We will ensure, our job is to ensure that all the expenditures are eligible for the federal funds, and then we will do the billing and reimbursement process and then pay City Car Share based on the funding that they submit that's eligible for reimbursement.
Whose decision, though, is the plan? I mean, there's got to be a plan. Here's where we're going to do it. We're going to act on it. Here's the cost. Whose decision it is to approve that plan?
Yeah, so that'll be CCTA working with both City Car Share and the two communities and MTC. Ultimately, we have to get MTC's buy-off on this because we couldn't do the full grant, so we have to kind of go back to them and say, okay, this is how much money we have, and make the case for these are the communities we want to serve, and this is why from a use perspective and a vehicle use perspective, what's going to work best. So the partnership, our team will work with MTC to finalize that plan.
So staff decision is what
Yes.
you're saying. Okay,
Yes.
I just want to be clear. I want to make sure that from a broad perspective that it is us making the decision.
Right.
So we're not just quite honestly being used.
Yes.
To facilitate this. There is a private business. I want to make sure it's going to the right thing and it meets our objectives.
Right.
And and it may be a balance. It may
Yes.
not be perfect for car share, but I hope that's what it comes out to be.
Yes.
That it meets our objectives, and hopefully it meets theirs.
Yeah, and ultimately we need it to meet MTC's objectives as far as the grant, so that's what we need to ensure. And we'll depend heavily on City Car Share regarding their 10 years of knowing how, what works best and what communities and things. I think the idea, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, of the lower income community is something that's, I shouldn't say it's new, but it's not as tested as the urbanized areas, so.
Actually, that was what I was going to say. It's very exciting to have it out here because it's been tested and successful in urban areas, but not so much in suburban areas. So I think it's wonderful that those two cities are going to get this opportunity. BART has had some experience with city car share already, and I feel confident that they will find the right places for it. I just want to say that it is good if it ends up being by BART, though, because one of the reasons that people don't take transit is that first mile, last mile issue, and this will allow people who would normally drive on congested Highway 80 to have an option to take transit because they could get there or they can get to their meetings in the middle of the day with car share. So I think it's pretty exciting.
This is the Bo Weevil question, and sorry if I'm coming off as being totally ignorant here. I was wondering if there's a Cliff Notes kind of summary of how this program works. And, I come from an area where, people will ask, what's CCTA doing spending $1 million on 17 cars? What's the deal here? What's the objective of the program? And what are the talking points here? Help me out, because I will get asked.
Here works.
Well, sure, I can tell you how city car share works. I'd like to point out that the $1 million isn't coming from CCTA. You're administering it, being fiscally responsible, but it's really coming from the federal government.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
The people that ask me these questions are taxpayers. It's their money.
Okay, got it.
Okay. So let's not say it's someone else's.
Okay, I just wanted to point out that it was not CCTA directly coming out of a CCTA budget. So the way car sharing works is people become members of City Car Share, and they're issued a electronic key and have the ability to reserve a car anywhere in the network. And when they go to that car, they use their electronic key to get into the car, use the car to go wherever they want to go, no tracking or anything like that, bring the car back to the location where it was originally taken from, and then they're automatically billed on a monthly basis for their usage. So turns out that, we have to go through the budget with you in detail, but turns out when you build a new pod, put in charging stations, buy 17 or 14 vehicles, whatever the number is going to be, that's how the numbers roll out.
Okay, so the people that are the beneficiaries of this system, they join.
That's right.
Okay.
Anybody can join. Anybody with a valid driver's
Now,
license
are they
can
means
join.
tested?
I'm sorry?
Are they means tested in any way, or is this open for anybody that wants to?
Anybody with a valid driver's license and a clean driving record can join.
Okay.
And a credit card, yeah.
All right. Okay, I got it.
They also, I'd just like to also point out, City Car Share has special programs for people who qualify as low-income individuals, so that they have reduced membership fees and reduced usage fees for those kinds of people. And they've been pretty good about things like the Access Mobile, which is the wheelchair-equipped vans, making those available to people too. I think what we're hoping to see in this, putting cars out in Richmond, El Cerrito North, and El Cerrito itself. El Cerrito actually already has a couple of cars. Is we hope to see not only local people becoming members, being able to take BART into the city or into Oakland, and then use City Car Share cars there, but also people going the other way, coming out of the city, out of Oakland, into the more remote areas. And I think somebody already pointed this out, using the cars there to go around their business in these more remote locations.
Follow-on question. We're doing a study out in La Miranda as to how do you handle this first mile, last mile problem. Mm-hmm. It's a huge out there because it's a cul-de-sac area.
Yep.
And there's quite a few people that use BART or would like to use BART, but simply virtually can't get there because there's no public way to do it. So while the immediate program doesn't go out into Moraga, Lafayette, right, doesn't touch St. Mary's College, which is a lot of people, a lot of kids out there, is it fair to project that maybe if this turns out to be a successful program in El Cerrito and Richmond, that there might be a follow-on program that could come into some of the other areas of the county?
Yeah,
Is
no
that the
promises,
objective?
of course, but I think in general, this is City Car Share sees this, they've been very successful in dense urban areas. And all car share organizations are trying to find ways to serve more outlying communities. And if this is successful, which I think it will be, I think we can see that replicated in other more remote areas. And to be honest with you, college campuses are a perfect place for car sharing. Because put a couple of car share pods on a college campus, and that reduces the traffic at the campus, enables people who are there without cars to get around and so forth.
FYI, they did do a Zipcar.
Zipcar.
They tried that, and it was a dismal failure. Nobody seems to understand why it was a failure, but it didn't catch on.
Yeah, Zipcar has a college program that's pretty active. So I don't know how successful they've been with it. It's interesting.
Janet?
I had a couple of follow-on questions. So are you saying there's no age restriction?
Yeah, there is an age restriction. It's 21, typically, unless you're a student, and then it's 18. So they have
So if you're a student, college student, or what?
college student typically, but
Then it's 18? Okay.
18.
Because that's a problem with renting regular cars.
right.
If I remember correctly, it's 25, yeah, that's what I
It's an
remember.
insurance issue, but I guess one of the things I should point out, since I think that, just general education about car sharing, is that when a person takes a car share vehicle, a city car share vehicle, they are, in addition to being covered for the actual use of the car, fuel, maintenance, all the normal things, they also have a $1 million liability policy following them around when they use the car. So, for that reason, City Car Share has to be fairly careful about screening members and making sure that they don't have any DUIs or other serious, prior convictions, as well as meeting this age test.
Okay, and then you mentioned that you have to have a credit card. So going back to this test is with people of low income. For people of low income, credit cards can be a problem.
An issue, yeah.
Are you going to look at that issue?
Yes. I wish I knew more about how City Car Share's low-income program works, but I think they have addressed that. I would like to maybe do a follow-up with you on that to be sure. We'll follow up.
Okay, thank you.
One question.
David?
Yeah, it's along the same lines as the last question that Janet asked, which is, I know a lot of low-income folks, I'm in the prepaid card business, so full disclosure, use prepaid cards in lieu of credit cards. So is it that you have to have a credit card to register, or is it just that you have to have a viable form of payment in order to register?
It's a viable form of payment. Like a debit card works as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Can I get a motion?
I'll move the item.
Second.
First by David, second by Julie. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries unanimously. 5.0 Correspondence Communications, Go Momentum Station Fact Sheet. Randy or Jack tonight?
I think I'll do it because Jack is sitting in the back there. So in lieu of a fact sheet, I thought I would, and we're still working on that fact sheet because all the components haven't been ironed out yet. So we made a presentation. We recently got back from the Transportation Research Board's annual meeting where we made a presentation on Wednesday night to announce the opening of the Gomentum station of the Concord Naval Weapons Station. And once again, what I said is there are three major goals in this program. Number one is making sure we don't get in the way of the safe, efficient transfer of the Concord Naval Weapons Station from the Navy to the city. So we're working very hard to make sure we don't violate any of the rules that are set forth. The second, and probably the most important, and the reason why we got involved was to create smart jobs for Contra Costa. And so as we move forward, we're trying to make sure that all the agreements have in place that if you test there, you're going to try to bring your research center or your call center ultimately to Contra Costa because that will create some great jobs. And then the third item is those are the first two goals, and we want to make sure that the third goal is we're going to change the world. We're going to actually try to make sure that we help facilitate this groundbreaking transformational technology if it works when it works here, right? Because that's what we do. We change the world. So that's how I kicked it off. We have Gomentum Station. The date is wrong and the location is wrong, but the point is still the same. We're going to announce it. And I told the members in the audience, there was about 125. Our goal was 100 people. This was done at the same time as the ITS America's reception in Washington D.C. at a different location, and the executive director's going away party, Bob Skinner. So he has been there for 20 years and he left. So it's probably the worst time, but we still had, our goal was 100. We had 125 people. And I told the audience, and I'll tell the audience here, that whenever I get to speak, as long as I don't miss the planning committee meeting, the APC meeting, or the authority meeting. I can give speeches around the world. But my commitment to the board is that I talk about CCTA. So that's what I put up on the board. It's a shorter version of 6 slides that we normally use, but Contra Costa Transportation Authority, we're the congestion management agency. We're also the sales tax authority. And I think that we do a great job in doing all those things that are listed there for Contra Costa. So the vision for the program is to build the center there that's going to converge the technology, it's going to innovate, it's going to commercialize and accelerate the deployment of this technology. The reason why we want to do connected vehicle, autonomous vehicles, that if the technologies take off, we're going to reduce that fatality rate in the United States by even more. So in my day when I worked for Caltrans, 42,000 people were killed on a yearly basis. Today, 33,000. Why is that? Are you getting better as a driver, or the car's getting smarter? Because we certainly aren't making inroads in making the roads safer very quickly, because everybody complains about not having enough money. So the cars are getting smarter, not allowing the driver to do certain things, and taking over where it can, so that the fatality rate is dropping, and we like that. This is actually the largest secure autonomous vehicle test bed in the world. And I say this, we're going down, Jack and I, we're going to make a presentation, the healthier environment. So Sandag is being sued on their regional transportation plans, a 40-year look, and we've talked about this before. We look 25 years ahead, but we use the existing technologies to make our project lists that we put before the voters, right? Well, Sandag is getting sued because California's population is growing. So when population grows and you have more people in your communities, you have more people driving, so the greenhouse gas are going up. Well, if you look at CARB is saying the greenhouse gases need to go this way, so you have an angle like this. And so they got sued, and they can't bring that line down. That delta's too big. And so if you think about technology in the future, and you think about electric vehicles, hybrid vehicles, and a more efficient roadways because of this technology, Sandag is interested in that. And so we're going down to brief their board at their retreat next week. But these are the other issues: job growth, efficient mobility, and of course safety. So it's the largest test bed in the world, as I mentioned before, and this is a great place to test. It's going to refine. There's no better place in Northern California for sure. It's an hour away from Sacramento. DMV has to get together their regulations. The agency so far is not that interested, but ultimately when it works, they will. They'll be interested.
They have no idea who they're dealing with. Or maybe they
So this is the Concord Naval Weapons Station. It's 5,000 acres. We have about 2,100 acres to test. So you've got about a 7-mile-long spine road that runs down the middle of that facility. It's high speed. You can go about 75, 85 miles an hour. Google was out there on the 20th, and so Google made a stop here, and one of the city council members, Laura Hoffmeister, was here to welcome Google, as well as their city manager, and then Mike Wright. Valerie was here as well, the city manager, and Mike Wright was here to welcome. And they talked about the virtues and the benefits of testing here in Contra Costa. So you have curvilinear alignment, and the profile changes, so you can see that there's over 20 miles of roadway out there. You can test anything you need to test: curves, sight distance problems. In Michigan, they have a porta-shed. It's actually when you park your car in the front yard, you can have a porta-shed, and there's an awning over the top. That's their tunnel. This is the Gomentum Station's tunnel. They're 1,000 feet. They're 1,400 feet long, about 20 foot in diameter. They're actual tunnels. So you got bents, you got bridges. This one is not guarded. The bent is not, or the columns are not guarded by guardrail, but there are a set that's guarded by guardrail. So you have various features that you can test on roadway geometrics. As I mentioned previously, nature's trying to take over the roadway, so you see a lot of cracking, a lot of weeds. They've actually mowed the weeds in this roadway, which is kind of weird, but that's what they did. So once again, curvilinear alignment, sight distance problems. You got railroad tracks. You got actual railroad crossings. So there's numerous crossings out there, so you can test. Some signs look like that. Some signs actually don't have railroad crossing. They're so worn out, they just have the X. So if you're going to use visual or optics kinds of technologies, you can use it with sign or without, because in the real world, not all signs are perfect. So the parking lot for testing, this is good also for skid testing. So what the autonomous vehicle manufacturers are going to try to test is different surface treatments on if it's wet, if it's dry, if it's shiny, if it's dark. So there's an opportunity here. Somebody asked about what are the things that we're going to test. So inside that Gomentum station, we're not sure because the automobile manufacturers haven't told us what they want to do. But the real prize here is going out to Federal Highway Administration and the United States Department of Transportation and going after, they have about $100 to $150 million to do testing outside in the real world. So that means if you're a city of choice like Concord, like Clayton, like Walnut Creek, wherever, we're going to get an allocation of federal money to update your traffic appurtenances to the latest, greatest, whatever they may be, so they can communicate with these autonomous vehicles. But you see transit in there, you see self-parking, you see pedestrian interface, motorcycles, and you have freight. So there's not just cars. So we're not just a highway-centric organization. Here's the landscape. So we try to define all the issues, the influencers, the applications, and the technology. Now, we don't know all the things that are happening, but we're going to fill probably more bubbles into that giant circle as we move forward with this program. And I invite you all, we're going to host a summit in Concord, California at is it the Hilton, Jack? The Hilton on the 31st. On the 30th, our partner is the Telecom Industry Association in Washington, D.C. located. A friend of mine used to run ITS America. He's quit and now went to work for TIA. So he's going to have a meeting on the 30th with a lot of Silicon Valley manufacturers in the telecom industry like Cisco, like AT&T, like Verizon, and bring them here and talk about the benefits of testing here and how close we are to the Silicon Valley. And so on the 31st, we'll host an event here also. I think it's 9 o'clock to 2:30, is that right? 9 to 2:30. So there'll be a lot of high-tech firms, if you're into that, and the various automobile manufacturers will talk about what their components are in the testing. And we're in lockstep. We try to be in lockstep with the city so we don't get ahead of the city. So the city understands what we're trying to do so that they don't get caught off guard. And so we're meeting with Valerie and Mike on a biweekly basis. We're going to make mistakes. We try to minimize those mistakes and make sure that we're all on the same sheet of music at the same time, because you can understand it's pretty important that the city council members of Concord understand what's happening as we do, so that we don't get ahead of each other. So those are the things that we're working on. That's what I said. And at the end of that, Cisco said, send us a teaming agreement. Now, Cisco is a big company that builds a lot of wireless routers, hubs, and switches, and we want them as a partner here. And then Navtech is another partner that said, send us a teaming agreement. They make high-definition mapping for the autonomous vehicles. So that was my presentation. I'm sorry it was a little long and it wasn't written up exactly quite right. Mala's here bending my arm saying that it should have said Randy was going to speak, and I always try to keep it a secret when I speak. Any questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
Who's really helping us with this?
Stantec. Stantec's a partner.
Okay. Can you go on a little bit of depth on that for me? Or maybe you want to talk to me later if you're not allowed to talk.
No, I can tell you exactly how it works.
Can you talk?
Sure, can I talk?
All right.
Okay, I can talk.
Well, I just
So-
want to make sure.
So what happened is we were getting ready to go out and make an application for a connected vehicle proposal whenever the federal government goes out with their RFP for this connected vehicle test sites that are going to be scattered around the United States. And I like to say that we're a David among Goliaths, no sorry, but to the Davids, not to say that, but, you know, we're a small agency compared to Florida DOT, Caltrans, or other major organizations, and so we're like a pea shooter among shotguns. And so we're going out, and I had Jack sign us up as a U.S. DOT connected testbed affiliate, and we were recognized immediately the next day. So we sent a shockwave around the United States that what's Contra Costa Transportation Authority becoming a testbed affiliate? Well, in order to fill that form out, we had Stantec. Stantec was there across the street. They're big into ITS. And they said, we'll help you make your application when we go to connected vehicles. So when Jack and I met with Mercedes, they were saying, you know, we're interested in connected vehicle technology. We'd like to test in Contra Costa, but we're really having problems with autonomous vehicles because we are testing out in Alameda. We're getting flat tires and because there's debris everywhere. And the thing about the test bed is there's, at the Naval Weapons Stations, there's no trash, no graffiti. There's nothing because it's guarded by the military. So Stantec helped us fill out the form. They helped us fill out the questions to the RFI. They're a partner. And what they see is that at the end of the day, if we're a test bed, they're going to be the consultant.
There it is.
So they're a partner. They're not our consultant. So they've been alongside of us, working together, trying to make sure that we get all these things ready. We met with US DOT, Ross and Lindsay met with the ITS JPO office, talking about the virtues of our test site, but really talking about when we move it onto the streets of Contra Costa, how we need help, monetary help, and guidance. So that's our partner, and that's we've got a number of partners. Our first signed MOU is with Honda.
Mercy.
Any other questions? Mike?
Yeah, Randy, can you, again, a little highlight on on this event on the March 31st? Just how do you see it? What do you see happening there?
So I see that, you know, we're trying to get a high-level official. I texted Victor Mendez, the Deputy Secretary, said, how do we get Secretary Fox out? He said, write a letter of invitation right into the Secretary's office. So that's one option. We're working with ITS America to see if we can get somebody higher in the administration, maybe the Vice President or somebody, to come out and just kick this off, because the President was out at Turner Fairbank and he loves this notion of autonomous vehicles and connected vehicles. So maybe we can get the Vice President, somebody to come out and say, you know, we're behind this testing, not only the connected vehicle, but also the autonomous vehicle. So you're going to get a keynote speaker, maybe 2 keynote speakers. And then what's going to happen is the partners, which include automobile manufacturers and what I call first-tier suppliers, those are the Densos or the Bosches of the world that build electronics, come out and talk about how the future is going to be, how it's going to impact our region, how fast it's going to come, because there's going to be a lot of questions, how they're going to work together. And then you've got the roadside equipment vendors like Econolite that builds the controllers. You've got Telegra who builds the signs that can send that sign information right into the car rather than have a sign in the future. You'll go right through your infotainment system because the car will be connected with the infrastructure. So they'll talk about how they're going to integrate into this autonomous vehicle test program. And it's probably going to take a while. But if you're into this technology, it'd probably be pretty interesting.
Karen?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was waiting for his other written report. I wanted to hear about the high-speed rail issue. Oh, wait, I'm sorry.
Couple items down.
We're not there yet.
Yeah,
That's
we're
fine.
not. Any other questions on this item? Janet?
I don't have a question, but I think what you're doing is absolutely amazing, and I wanted to say so. Thank you. And not only that, the next night I saw you in Sacramento.
Now I was tired.
Moving on to item 6, Associated Committee reports. Any comments on those? Item number 7, Commissioner and staff comments, chair's comments and reports. Randy? No, me.
I can give your report.
I have nothing. I'm still the chair for another couple minutes. No, I have no comments at this time. Commissioners' comments, reports. Anybody else? Mike, you have something? Okay. Anybody else? Now on to executive staff comments. Randy?
So I have a couple of points here. Most of it's autonomous vehicle kind of partnership meetings, but the high-speed rail broke ground in Fresno on the 4th. It was actually a warm winter day, I guess, if that's the way to say it. They had a number of union workers in the background standing on a stage like the governor's office normally sets up as a backdrop. And high-speed rail, he actually worked for BART. He was on your board. Dan Richards. So he was the MC, gave a great speech. They had speakers, Jerry Brown, the Governor Brown was there. There was just a, pardon?
I said who you met through me at a luncheon.
That's right. Dan Richards was there. And so they kind of laid out the program. They had the union speak. They had the contractor representative speak. It was probably 200 people at a vacant lot that they had cleared, getting ready for the trains, the high-speed train station in Fresno. So if you know Fresno, on the other side, when I was the director, we hosted an event there to announce that we got $2.25 billion on Track 2 Recovery Act allocation for the high-speed rail, for the high-speed rail section. So that's between Bakersfield and Fresno, the only spot that you can go over 200 miles an hour. So we hosted on the other side of the track at the Amtrak station in Fresno. This time it was on the other side of the tracks where they cleared out. It was a great event. The problem was there was a number of protesters because it still hasn't been welcomed warmly in the Central Valley. And a lot of my people, my buddies that went to school, high school with me, they're now farmers, and they think that this high-speed rail is going to ruin the way of life. And they often call me and tell me that. And I say, well, if there's a gazillion people there, because one of the places they're going to move is the Central Valley. How are you going to move all these people?
Where'd you go to high school?
Reedley High School.
Oh, go.
So within 25 miles was my mom. So actually after the event, it's great.
It's Randy Iwasaki.
It's great.
There's going to be a sign there one day.
Yeah, it's actually I was born in Dinuba, where Cruz Bustamante and Doris Matsui were born as well. Anyway, the high-speed rail event was great.
Was former Governor Schwarzenegger there?
No.
He wasn't invited.
No, Jim Costa spoke about it, and Ashley Swearingen, the mayor, was there. She's really just laser focused on that for the redevelopment. The supervisor, Perea, was there. They're all local. It's really a jobs bill, and it's redefining the Central Valley, if you will, between Fresno and Bakersfield. But that money has to be spent. There's a lot of discussion about why isn't that money being used somewhere else. It has to be used on a high-speed track. So you can't go 200 plus miles an hour probably anywhere else in California. And then the other point here, does that answer your question, Supervisor? Okay. So and then Lindsay was, for her first trip to the Transportation Research Board, 10,000 people converge on Washington, D.C. in the worst week in the whole year, the second or third week in January. The high was 34 degrees. One day the high was 19. I mean, it was unbelievably cold. But you have 10,000 people. There's an item there or a topic that you would like to hear, and you're going to be able to walk in there and hear experts speak about it. In my case, I gave the GoMentum announcement on Wednesday night. On Sunday, I talked about traffic data and how the storage is getting so cheap. You can gather all this data, and now you have to analyze the data. So we're starting to think, how do we present in a transparent way how we're moving the needle here to the good. So greenhouse gas reductions, whatever it is that we want to measure, how do we get there? Because we can certainly store and get access to the data. So Lindsay is working on that. And then I spoke on Tuesday about how you changing organizations. And I talked about how we have changed here, or at least how in staff we have worked to make sure that our internal communication is getting better, making sure that we're decision-making is getting done quicker, how we empower our employees. How I use the example of the executive assistants getting together and redefining how they produce these packets. So Denise is in charge of making sure that all of the minutes are done. So she does the minutes. So they're all consistent. And then she passes them on to Christina and Diane. And they own the packets then. So if Ross or Martin want to make changes or somebody else makes change, they make the changes, not Denise. But everything is consistent. And so we made that change. And afterwards, a guy from a fellow organization said, I want you to give that same speech to my organization. And I said, we'd be happy to do that. And then a young lady from Delaware wrote a note saying that she was motivated after that, and she realized that's why she became a civil engineer. So, I mean, it kind of made me cry, but, you know, I'm a sensitive guy. And that's my and that's my report. And that's my report. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for that report.
And you
It
will
was,
be at the planning committee meeting.
Yeah.
Jack is going to go make it.
Yeah, Jack's going to Washington to represent the authority. The ITS JPO office wanted us to come talk about a multimodal organization. That's in Washington, D.C. at United States Department of Transportation. And so to invite CCTA is a big honor. And I agonized over it for about 4 minutes, and I said, Jack, you're going to have to go because there's no way I can make it back for the planning committee meeting. So Jack's going to represent us at ITS JPO office in Washington, D.C., talking about what kind of projects we're producing in order to make us multimodal. We'll talk about the car share EV car share program. We'll talk about our connection protection project with Tri-Delta Transit, and we'll talk about all the funding that we do, the Hercules Rail Station, and then our highway projects. So they're excited to hear from us. And we're the only agency outside that's coming in to brief the ITS JPO. So Jack has a tremendous weight on his shoulder.
On to item 8, calendars. Any questions about the calendar? If not, item number 9, move on to adjournment. We will see you next February 18th.
Planning committee meeting.